Could you start with your name and your job title, please?
I'm Aayush. I work for CrickBuzz as a sub-editor / journalist. Yes.
Slash journalist. Let's get you as your slash journalist today. You have written a book. I'm going to allow you to say the name and the title and where everyone can buy it from.
The book is Unveiling Jazba. It's on the history of Pakistan women's cricket. They completed 25 years in 2022. It is available everywhere in UK, US, Australia, New Zealand, India, on Amazon, and of course on Book Depository, Waterstones, W.H. Smith, wherever.
Yeah. Flipkart. Is it on Flipkart?
No, not on Flipkart.
Flipkart. Let's start with the story. So Shahid Afridi a few years ago said that women's hands should be used for cooking and not cricket. He then got a lot of flack from that, backtracked, and said, regardless, he was misquoted or taken out of context, as we all are, but that he still wouldn't let his daughter play cricket or daughters play cricket. That is the world that Pakistani women's cricket lives in, isn't it? That's an accurate reflection of the society that those players have to survive in.
Yes, in a way. Firstly, Shahid Afridi was not misquoted. I saw the full video. He was not misquoted because he said similar things later on. And it kind of shows up in a way when so many of the Pakistani cricketers, the women cricketers, actually adore Shahid Afridi. And
everyone adores Shahid Afridi.
Yeah. So it's like, whatever he says and all of that, they don't care about it. They probably don't believe it. Of course they don't. But they do adore him. So yes, it is a reflection in a way. Because Shahid Afridi, he'll come and back the women's team. It's not like he won't back the team, but it's like not my daughter. And that is the case everywhere. Great, somebody else is bringing laurels to the country. That's fantastic. But it can't be my daughter. And unfortunately, it's a very, very complex issue. And as Sana Mir, the captain of Pakistan, long-time captain of Pakistan team says, that the West does not understand the complexity of this yes and no, because there is a huge battle that they're facing, the parents, because the moment the parents step up and support their children, they are taking on a system which is not made up by one person, it just exists. So there are a lot of battles that not just the players who are fighting, it's also their families who are fighting. And it is very complex. From the outside, it can seem very easy for us to just say that okay, they are not allowed to play. But I mean, unfortunately, somebody like Shahid Afridi can probably lend that support. He's strong enough, powerful enough, big enough. But for parents of these cricketers who come from middle class families, from rural areas, lower middle class families, it is not as easy. They've had to many of them have gotten beaten up. Some of them have had relationships cut off with their extended families. Some of them had to play in secrecy. And there's just 86 women eventually who have played in 25 years, managed to reach up to the point. And trust me, they're the ones who have actually got support. And these are the stories of women who have got support. It's beyond my imagination to think, what about those cricketers who never even made it? What could their stories be like?
Yeah, we'll move on to the main story eventually. But I mean, there were tales that a woman was sexually assaulted in Pakistan cricket not that long ago, really, and took her own life. We know there's a lot of dark kind of stories out there, don't we?
Yes. Unfortunately, as the court would rule it, she wasn't assaulted. As far as the reports are concerned, the report by the committee, she sort of used it to, I don't know, to blackmail the organizers
I will say this though, that is that is used a lot with victims as well. Yes. So it's a murky thing, but the point is that is something that we don't really see in general cricket, women or men's around the world. Like there are specific differences and problems that the Pakistan women have that don't really translate over to others. Is that fair to say?
Not really, because in India itself, there have been cases of women alleging that there's sexual harassment.
Oh no, I meant the whole structure. So from the sexual harassment to the to Shahid Afridi coming out and saying things, to the cultural norms, to the legal norms, even within women's cricket in Southeast Asia, in subcontinental Asia, which has many challenges right across the game. Feels like Pakistan has maybe higher hurdles than some of the others. It's slightly trickier in some ways.
I think so. I mean, I don't know enough about Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, but when I actually got going with this story, the first time I went to interview these players, I thought their stories would be similar to that of the Indian players. We hear a lot of these players coming from rural backgrounds, having to fight their way up, not rich enough, and all of that. But in Pakistan's case, it was almost like almost everyone had to face these battles of acceptance, which isn't the case even with India. India, you'd hear stories, you'd talk to the national players, it would be like, yes, my father wanted me to play, that's why I ended up playing. With Pakistan, barely any fathers wanted their children to play, and they came up there. They had to fight the system and get accepted first within the family. It's not even about the father. Sometimes it's the brother that they're hiding from, because brother wouldn't allow them to play. So yes, Pakistan is different from India in a lot of ways. And that is what sort of surprised me and got me hooked onto this story.
All right, well, let's go back to Benazir Bhutto, because weirdly enough, in some ways, she sort of started the Pakistani women's momentum, I suppose, towards becoming a team, because she was looked up at by two, I suppose you would say, women of privilege, or girls of privilege, probably around that age. And they sort of saw that if there was a woman who could run Pakistan, then perhaps there was a chance that women could also play cricket for Pakistan, which is a fair and reasonable thought process, but probably didn't go over particularly well at the time.
Yes, Benazir Bhutto sort of became the face because there were a lot of women within Pakistan who were fighting in it. And Benazir Bhutto, at the end of the day, there was an aspect of revenge because Benazir's father, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, he was sort of thrown out of power by Zia-ul Haq. So she had definitely some political motivations and she kept the fight on. But there were a lot of women within Pakistan who were fighting this. In the space of art, in theater, Ajoka theater, they were in space of dance, there was in the space of music. All of this, women were banned from doing all of this. And there was fight happening all together. But yes, the moment Benazir Bhutto had the camera and all of that of the Western media, of BBC on her, so that sort of becomes the popular face. And in a way, she also sort of inspired when Zia-ul Haq was eventually thrown out of power. She came and became the prime minister of the country. She was extremely popular at that point. So yes, that gives hopes to a lot of other women, and Shaiza and Sharmeen, who were in England at that point, were inspired by the fact that, okay, now it's a free country, Pakistan, it's a democratic country, so to say. And if the country can accept a women leader, why not women cricketers?
So they're in the UK. Tell me a little bit about those two sisters and their background.
So they come from a fairly affluent family in Karachi. Their father, he had a carpet business, which Shaiza is running now. And in the 1980s, when Zia-ul Haq was in Pakistan, of course, women were not allowed to play outside. So they would play within the compounds of the fairly large house, palatial house, in a way. But during the summer vacations, they would go to the UK. They would play there for a club, Winchmore Cricket Club. And that sort of inspired, I don't know, they just fell in love with the game because one day Shaiza won them a game and with Sharmeen at the other end. So they were inspired to believe that they can make it big here. They could dream at that point. So yes, they kept going there and eventually they went to study there in UK and they started living there in the 80s, mid 80s. So yes, Shaiza did her schooling from Middlesex. She went on to play county for Middlesex. She studied at Leeds University. She was doing a doctorate in PhD in textile studies. So that they did sort of a comfortable life in UK because they had the money. They could play cricket. They could do everything. But one thing they couldn't do as citizens of Pakistan was represent England in cricket. So that dream was there. The only way they can play cricket, international cricket as they wanted to, they had to come back to Pakistan. And as their father saw it, maybe that wasn't the best idea for them, because as soon as they came, they were met with death threats.
And at that stage, they come back to the UK, don't they? They end up leaving Pakistan at the first attempt where they try and make a cricket team, don't they?
Yes, because the father thought they wanted to play cricket. That's it. The dream within them was to play cricket for Pakistan, or rather play cricket internationally, not for Pakistan specifically, but internationally. Which is something that both of them didn't understand, or rather they didn't communicate that well, those thoughts. Yep. So yes, they had to go back because they tried to play cricket here. They were met with death threats from Jamaat-e-Islam, a religious right-wing outfit, because even though Zia-ul Haq had passed away, the most regressive regime Pakistan has had, there were after effects. These small religious outfits who would never get voted to power sort of had authority on the ground to disturb things. So the first time they tried organizing a match, they received death threats and they were like, no, you can't play against a men's team. That men's team even had Zahir Abbas back then. So they were given another option. Shaiza was extreme. I don't know if jugad is a word used in UK, in the Western world. But jugad,
I don't know what it means.
Okay, it's a management term, I think, used in UK, but in India and Pakistan, it means to make do with limited resources. To make something happen out of limited resources, which Shaiza was very good at. And she could bargain. She was very assertive. So she bargained into a sort of a situation wherein you can play a game, but against a women's team. So they spoke to the police commissioner. Police commissioner didn't want any more fights. So they provided apparently 8,000 policemen to guard them and allow two women's team made up of people who can just basically throw the ball or bat or whatever. It was not a proper cricket game, but a cricket match happened with 24 women were there who stayed with Shaiza the day before the match, went to the ground on the day of the game. And yes, they played a game. With the support, but then that was the condition that after this she has to go back to the UK.
And they do create a team. So how do they go from that to creating a team? Because that seems, if you need 8,000 people to set up a game, I just feel that's not sustainable.
Yeah, and so she comes back in 1993. There's a World Cup in England. She gets in touch with the people who were running with the women's game there. And they realize there are certain formalities that they have to fulfill. One of them is to go back and be a resident of Pakistan for 1 year. So she has to give up on her PhD studies. She goes back. But of course, parents don't want their daughters to play there. They're scared of their safety. They are not sure where this woman is taking them. So she comes back, she has to hold tournaments. Now she has to have a complete domestic structure. So all of it is just made up. Okay, they can't play. They really can't play. But something has to be shown to the organizers of the women's game, international women's game. So a bunch of girls are just pooled in. Remember, one strong resource Shaiza has is money. And money can make things happen. So small groups are organized, women are called in, and they can be anything. They can be players who are playing hockey, javelin throw, all sorts of sports.
Any athlete.
Yeah. Basically, anyone who just willingly come to the ground and participate in a game of cricket, in a small mini tournament, just to show to IWCC that a tournament, we have organized a tournament and we have fulfilled our formalities. And that is how the first tournament is held. And then, of course, a selection trial, a full-fledged selection trial is held with the lure that if your daughter gets selected, she becomes a part of the Pakistan women's team. Now, remember, this is 1996. 4 years, just 4 years into their first ever World Cup win for the men's team. Cricket is big. 1996 also had the World Cup in Pakistan along with India and Sri Lanka. So at that point, it is peaking. There's songs that are running to promote cricket by popular bands. Cricket is huge in Pakistan at that point. So yes, there is a bit of a lure for certain parents, even though there are apprehensions, to send their daughters just to play a game. So yes, 60 odd people turned up at the Karachi's National Stadium for trials, and 15 left for New Zealand for the first ever tour.
There's a note I have here, and I know I've read it in your book, but now I've forgotten why. The note says, secretly escaped from Pakistan exit control list.
Yeah.
Can you explain my note back to me and why I wrote that down?
So now the thing was, they went for this tour to England, New Zealand and Australia, and it was a huge deal because there is a belief, no documented evidence, but there is a saying that that was the first ever women's team outside of the Olympics to travel abroad to play any sport. So in that sense, it got a lot of limelight in the press, and now comes a throwback of a cricket structure that existed in the 1970s, late 1970s, early 1980s, till 1982, before Zia became all powerful. A bunch of women in Lahore were already playing, and they belonged to an elite circle. They had, I mean, the family members were politicians, businessmen, lawyers, uh, extremely affluent in Pakistan. So they sort of rose, and they were like, we are the deserving and organizers of Pakistan cricket. Uh, we hold that right to represent Pakistan, and not a bunch of people who have just risen recently. So they get into a fight. And as it turns out, for some reason, which no one would say why, but they are put on an exit control list, which is basically given to hardcore criminals who can't leave the country. And this team, so now all three teams are preparing. There are three groups now willing to go and play the World Cup in India. And they actually, all three of them even turn up in India. It's not even like they're just planning for it. They've all turned up with their resources and all of that. So one team, Shaiza's team, is put on the exit control list. And Shaiza, again, because she has some clout in Karachi, she finds out about that through, I don't know through whom, but she finds out about this. And the team was set to fly from Lahore to Delhi because that is the shortest flight. So she finds out that the notice has reached the Lahore airport. Now, this is 1997, and we have extremely slow government processes, and it has not reached the Karachi airport. So overnight, they make a dash to Karachi. The entire team, Shaiza goes to Islamabad to pick up the passports, and from Karachi, they head to Delhi eventually. So yes, they secretly escaped because legally they were not allowed to.
There's a couple of interesting things. I mean, that's a ridiculous story. The
Yeah.
other thing that when you look at women's cricket history, and you obviously know this story really well. It's incredible how many posh, wealthy 1% women have been involved. And if they hadn't have been, I wonder where women's cricket would have been if Ladies Who Leisure and early widows and all those sorts of things that happened. Because geez, there was a lot of things put up between women and playing cricket that is ridiculous. Now, everything you've talked about so far is under what we would call the old structure of women's cricket, which was the International Women's Cricket Council. Is that right? Yeah. And that then gets, I won't want to say merged, but vacuumed up by the ICC, and women's cricket becomes part of the ICC. That means that the women's cricket team becomes part of the PCB. That doesn't seem like a brilliant fit at that stage.
Oh, not at all, especially because one PCB wasn't really interested in running the women's affairs, but because there was a directive from the Lahore High Court to find the real, I don't know, administrators of women's cricket. And to top it, there were like three groups fighting for that title, and some of them had financial clout, some had political clout, some just were related to each other. So Shahryar Khan, to his credit, he tried to bring all three parties in together. One party led by Tahira Hamid, I think they agreed to this. The other party, they fought Shahryar Khan, and Shaiza Khan sort of got involved, but yes, she had certain conditions. She wanted certain control, which Shahryar Khan and the Tahira Hamid group who joined in weren't willing to compromise on with Shaiza. So it was a battle. I mean, they had a lot of resources. All those three groups, they could have done a lot more. But at the end of the day, it had become an ego battle. They all wanted to be the true representatives of Pakistan women's cricket. They all wanted that limelight on themselves. But having said that, yes, you needed rich people in there. Without Shaiza, that's why I keep saying, even though Shaiza came in 1997, there were certain women playing much before her. Without her, this wouldn't have been possible. Pakistan wouldn't have had a women's team if not for her.
So that's the kind of crazy first half. I mean, it's obviously someone should get your book for far more detail and all that sort of stuff. The second half is really Sana Mir appearing. I think probably most casual fans have heard of her. You know, she becomes the totem of Pakistan women's cricket. I'm trying to think of, probably since Imran Khan, has any one cricketer had that much impact in Pakistan on their generation of cricketers and cricket in general, how it was seen outside. She was that big, wasn't she? I only assume, and I think I've only met her once, but I assume that is she also from a wealthy background? Is that her backstory?
Yes. She is a daughter of an army man. She could just step out and play, and there's no one to stop her. She had all the support. She had all the resources. When she went out to play, she probably didn't have any struggles in that sense, what the other players did. It's something that even she admits to. But yes, I would probably think she was even more stronger than Imran Khan, because Imran Khan, at the end of the day, within the team, there were people who may not like him. Sana Mir, I mean, what surprises me is that she's part of the same age group as most of the other cricketers. The Asmavia, Iqbal, they all came around the same time. Yet it was Sana Mir who had that commanding presence. And you have to realize that all these players post the PCB takeover came from, had to battle a lot to reach that point. So within that cricket ground, they found their safe space. And within that safe space, Sana Mir is not just a leader on the field. She's a lot more of it. They're confiding in her. She's a friend. I mean, as one of the multiple coaches have said, she was a friend, she was a mother, she was a captain, she was a sister, she was everything to them. And which is weird because you're of the same age group, but maybe because she didn't have so many stars while coming through the system, she was confident. And one advantage that Sana Mir had was her ability to communicate. She can make you feel warm. She gives you comfort when she speaks. So that, in a sense, a lot of players uh, went along well with her, and they liked her. They could just trust her completely. But at the same time, Sana took on the system and had to battle quite a few administrators. So yes, she was all powerful. She could lobby. She could lobby just by the mere strength of people power.
Tell me about the Asian Games.
The two victories.
Yeah, so are they against full strength teams? Where was Sri Lanka at that stage? I'm assuming Pakistan were not favored to win the first one.
Not really. The first one didn't have India and Sri Lanka. At that time, the two strongest Asian cricket teams. They had to fight Bangladesh, and they had an easy ride. Now, both the Asian Games victories, even in the second Asian Games victory in 2014, it wasn't a tough challenge because Bangladesh beat Sri Lanka in the semi-finals. On both occasions, Pakistan had to beat Bangladesh, and at that point, they were far superior from Bangladesh as compared to Bangladesh. So, in that sense, those victories from a cricketing standpoint wasn't big, but it brought out the fact that Pakistan has a women's team to the front pages.
Yeah.
Because in those Asian Games, there were other sports that were happening, and Pakistan really didn't win a lot of medals, apart from the women's team winning gold medals. So it was a big occasion in terms of a sporting achievement. But purely from a cricketing standpoint, the oppositions weren't strong. But just the fact that they won gold medal, they were everywhere in the newspapers, in the news channels, and there was recognition to the fact that women play cricket, which till date there is not enough knowledge of the fact girls coming from tier two towns and beyond Lahore and Karachi that a women's team exists. Even today, including journalists, I am not even going there, they can't name an 11 of a Pakistan team. So there is a lack of knowledge in that sense. So the Asian Games victories helped the team get that limelight.
The after that, Mark Coles becomes coach. We've done an episode with him on here, which, if no one's ever listened to it, is worth listening to his life story, regardless of the Pakistan bit. It's incredible before you get to the Pakistan coaching bit. Feels like from the outside and from people I've talked to that what Mark Coles did is sort of, I suppose professionalize is the wrong way, but certainly got them on the road towards professionalism and thinking about cricket differently. Obviously, Sana helped as well because she was there. It was that sort of the two of them pushing together. But it felt like having a coach come over from New Zealand who had coached women before, who came in without the political knowledge or the local tension and just a coach was probably what they all needed.
Yes, high time. And because just before Mark Coles came in, things are falling off for Pakistan cricket. Sana Mir resigned and she sort of it almost came to a point where she had threatened retirement. And the only big figure to say that I'm retiring because the system is not working, functioning properly, wouldn't have been a great thing for Pakistan Cricket Board. So one of the conditions she laid down was we need a foreign coach. And the reason she said that was just before that, for 6 months, they had 5 different coaches training the team. They would all come and nothing would work out. And there's a lot of friction within the team. There were letters written out in the open, the coach blaming the captain blaming the coach. And it was all dirty. They needed to start on a fresh note. And it couldn't have been, firstly, a person from within Pakistan because they realized historically that the coach who comes in has the support of the administration and the administration wants certain things to happen certain ways, which doesn't really help the team at all times. So when a new guy comes in, he comes in without the baggage of any sort of bias. He comes in, and secondly, what Mark Coles could do, which none of the other Pakistani coaches, even at the best of their intentions, could do, was understand that women's cricket needs a different approach. Till that point, the women's team were being coached in a way they would coach club cricketers, the club boys coming to play club cricket. And that really didn't help them grow because something as simple as going on the back foot wasn't working out for the women cricketers because they didn't have the strength, they didn't have the weight, they didn't have the power. So they were constantly told under Mark Coles, and Andy Richards also joined in, that you have to play on the front foot. A lot of unlearning happened at that point. So the approach changed completely at that point. And most importantly, because in India and Pakistan, especially at lower level, coaching is with a scale in hand, a ruler in hand. It's tough. So a lot of shouting, screaming, and for a lot of these cricketers who are beating all sorts of challenges, coming to the national level, they want comfort, they want assurance. Scolding doesn't help, which I think Mark Coles understood. And he was one of the few coaches. There was, of course, Mohtasham Rashid and other coaches who adopted that similar approach. But in Mark Coles' era, a lot of things happened wherein, firstly, they were not criticized for making mistakes, which was new. A lot of cricketers would say that we could play, we could trial out a lot of things without the fear of being scolded, even in a simple practice session or during a real match scenario. So a lot of things changed, yes.
Most notably, he bought them ice cream when they lost the game and they all thought they were about to be told off, which is my favorite Mark Coles story. I want to talk about the talent very, very briefly just to finish up here. But there is obviously talent in Pakistan women's cricket because why would there not be? They're not born any different than women anywhere else. I always think of Almas Akram, the left arm swing bowler, and I will watch her and go, I don't think I've ever seen a person swing the ball as much as her, but she was bowling around the wicket left arm when she should have been bowling over the wicket because she'd never had proper coaching before. Of recent times, I suppose the big breakthrough has been Nadia in the Big Bash. I forgot what, did she play for the Scorchers? No.
Thunder.
Who?
Thunder. Sydney Thunder.
Sydney Thunder. Yeah.
The one with the green jersey. Yeah.
Yeah, I should know that. I covered that tournament about 3 years. But that's a huge moment for Pakistan cricket, isn't it? To get a younger player through in professional. I mean, obviously Sana Mir is well known and whatever, but the fact that that's now happening is huge for Pakistan.
It is huge, but the problem is Pakistan will never, I mean, unfortunately, I wouldn't say never, but they're not at a stage where they can get the most talented players in the country to be playing for the team. Yeah, it is invariably players who get acceptance from their families, from their neighbors, from their relatives to play. So you are anyway playing out with a small sample size. Even their domestic structure, they barely have like 45 odd cricketers playing domestic cricket as of now, because they don't believe they have more cricketers to even run a domestic setup. So they're far from finding the most talented cricketers, but now you have Fatima Sana, a good pacer, hopefully a fast bowling all-rounder in the future, and Aisha Naseem, who can hit the ball big. They haven't discovered such players earlier. So more players are coming through from the system, but right now it is still awaiting acceptance, a social acceptance. Till that point, you're not discovering the most talented cricketers. But even I was speaking to Lisa Salekar, she was telling me that yes, they have a lot of talented cricketers, which even in Australia they won't find. Crafty players more, because that is the only sport that they're playing in Pakistan, unlike in Australia where they're playing multiple sports. So a lot more craft in those players, but yes, fitness standards, diets, a lot of things are missing, and it's not their fault. It is. I remember talking to one of the players, a squash player. She was like, "We can't talk about diets because so many people don't even get 3 meals a day." There were players in the 2018 World Cup going to the 2018 T20 World Cup in West Indies and skipping meals because they wanted to save up money and send that money back home. So you're realizing that the kind of food, nutrition that they're having, and they're competing against teams like Australia who have high fitness standards, best of nutrition, all sorts of support. It's not an even playing field when they actually step on the field. So yes, maybe there is a lot more talent to be discovered, but as of now, no. Right now, they're not the most talented cricketers. I wouldn't say that.
I think talented is the wrong word. What you mean is polished and professional and ready, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? The actual talent is probably there, but as you said, they're probably not picking from their best group anyway, but you're completely right. I'm going to finish with this. You talk about Hadil Obaid and her death threats. Can you just take us through that one a little bit?
Yeah, I was just talking to Hadil Obaid. She runs a small organization called Khelo Cricket in Karachi, and now it's just spreading to different parts of Pakistan. And she was telling me, just as a matter of fact, that yeah, she keeps getting death threats. And in the first year, she got a lot of death threats because she organizes one, among a lot of other things that she organizes. One is a late night cricket tournament during the month of Ramzan for girls. So that was a novel idea for her, but when she put up that idea, that was seen as unholy. Firstly, to do that in the month of Ramzan, to allow girls to play out in the open, was seen unholy by a bunch of, again, these extremist religious groups. She didn't pay heed to them early on, but over the years, the games have continued. More and more parents have come in with their daughters. And I mean, I don't know how they can just overlook the fact that they're getting death threats. I don't know, but they're coming in. And now, since more and more parents are accepting that the girls can come out and play in the open, these religious outfits now don't have a card to play anymore because nobody's supporting them any longer. So that is evolving, that is changing.
What do you think the future is? They went to the World Cup. Bangladesh seems to be a better team than Pakistan right at the moment. What do you think that the future is over the next 5 or 10 years for Pakistani women's cricket?
there is a lot of scope. There are they need some revision, because a lot of training that has to happen is at the basic level. Now they have to go up. Like even now, I don't understand why an Aisha Naseem is batting at number 7, because she's the only one who can hit sixes on demand in that team. But it is improving. There are some new, again, the entire domestic structure has been restructured. So 5 years down the line, maybe we can see the results. As of now, there are criticisms and advantages. Maybe 5 years down the line, we'll figure out whether the system has worked in getting more girls from the grassroots structure to be coming and playing for the team.
I mean, obviously it's been incredibly tough for so many of the women involved, and we started with death threats, we ended with death threats, right? So it's absolutely horrendous. But how good is it that you can get to a point with Pakistani women's cricket where you could sit there and moan about the batting order, which I think is a huge step up from everything else. Thank you very much for coming on to the podcast, and everyone should go and read your book, which is called
Unveiling Jasba, a History of Pakistan Women's Cricket.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot, Jarrod. It was a pleasure talking to you.